9:02, we'll go ahead and start the meeting. If you could run us through our roll call, please.
Certainly, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Okay, the April 3rd JLMBC meeting is now starting. We are going to start with roll call for employee organizations first. Shauna Janeway in for Janita.
I'm here.
Marlene Fonseca.
Here.
Chad Bozier. No. Esteban Lozardo. Lisa Palombi.
Here.
Now starting with management. Gracie Liu.
Here.
Tony Royster.
Here.
Matthew Rudnick.
Present.
Paul Gerard in for Matt Seisel.
Present.
Petty Santos in for Holly Walcott.
Here.
Thank you. We have quorum.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any public comments?
For attendees on the phone, please press star 9 on your phone to be placed in line for the speaker queue. For attendees in the room, please bring up your speaker card to the front desk. Okay, looks like we have no attendees in queue or in person.
Okay, thank you. So we can move on to action item number 3, committee report 2512 on IAPDP.
Good morning, JLMBC. This is an update. At the last meeting, the JLMBC agreed to postpone the original recommendation. Once a total number of confirmed attendees for the 2025 IFEBP annual conference, which will be held in Honolulu, Hawaii from Sunday, November 9th to Wednesday, November 12th, 2025. The number of responses collected by the deadline was a total of 3 JLMBC members.
Thank you. Do you have any questions? I have one. If there was somebody else who wanted to attend, for example, if there's a transition, let's say, God forbid something happens, and then somebody else joins JLMBC, oh, I want to go. Is there a process that we can add them in, or it's just completely locked? And this is a bit of an extreme example, but just in case.
So to add an additional attendee.
Since we've done the approval for a specific number,
Mhm.
if something happens where somebody else wants to attend and they haven't said yet, is there a process for that, or is it that's it? It's a
I would assume we'd go through the same process. We'd have to submit
just
the.
come back and add it in. And,
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Just want to make sure.
Mhm.
I don't think it'll happen, but
Okay.
just in case.
Ask a clarifying question. And so, recommendation A is for to attend in person, and recommendation B is that if anyone after today wants to go virtually, then is that an unlimited number of members? I see and that's a little confusing. So the people who responded were people who wanted to go in person, but if somebody wants to attend virtually, is that what B means, that we could still add people on virtually?
The deadline was to attend either in person or virtually, but if there is some interest, you can reach out to us and we'll consider that.
Correct. Just to add on to what Ruby said. So there's a total of 5 individuals to go in person and any number of people outside of that 5 to go virtually. So just the registration would be for the virtual. There would be no other travel expenses.
Do you have any other questions or any motion? Second. Are we just approving yeah, we're just approving the funding to. Thank you. Can we go ahead and do the roll call vote?
Starting with the roll call order, we're going to start with the employee organizations first. Shauna Janeway, your vote.
Aye.
Aye. Marlene Fonseca, your vote.
Aye.
Lisa Palombi, your vote.
Aye.
Gracie Liu, your vote.
Aye.
Tony Royster, your vote.
Aye.
Matthew Rudnick, your vote.
Nay.
Paul Gerard, your vote.
Nay.
Holly Walcott, your vote. I'm sorry, Penny Santos, your vote.
No, I'll stay.
Okay, the ayes have it. Oh, no,
It needs to be
sorry.
quorum on both sides.
Oh, those are quorum. Apologies.
Is it possible to table this to the next meeting, so, I know the event is not included, is that correct?
That is correct. So yeah, this definitely could come back. I mean, since it didn't pass, it can come back. If there is a desire for it to come back.
I think it needs to be discussed.
That,
So, motion,
Well, we can just schedule. I don't think we need a motion to bring it back. We can just schedule it for a later.
It did not pass. Okay. So you would have to reschedule. Later date, to bring it back.
is
So,
that, is that, that doesn't,
it means.
does that conflict with, no, I know, I'm thinking procedurally, if you're saying that the management side is having a separate meeting, does that violate open meeting?
So you can have a,
Part of this,
what do you call it, it's an office.
how does that work? I don't see how that works.
Whatever is going on. So make sure everybody's on the same page.
What is the motion or is the discussion item to propose to create an ad hoc for discussion, or is it
No,
just?
I think the issue that,
Okay.
you know, put it this way, it's been denied.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Tony and everyone, when speaking to you, please speak into the microphone.
I think what we can do is just, it's been denied, whatever, if we're gonna have to discuss, we'll do that.
Okay. And just, I'm sure legal is gonna say, just to back on, just, there cannot be discussion that would create a quorum, so it can't be a discussion of any, on either side, of more than two people.
I mean, because the way the JLMBC is organized, there's a quorum with respect to each organization, the labor and management.
Okay,
So if there is any discussions, it has to be within a number less than quorum for the purpose of the.
okay,
But just to be clear, for this item, the vote was taken and it did not advance.
okay.
And so the desire to bring this back at a later time, this committee could always choose to do so. But I don't know if there's any need for further discussion on this item unless there's a motion to reopen the item. And then you would have to revote
Yeah.
and then have a further discussion.
Can I ask what the issue is?
Good morning, Matthew Rudnick. And I apologize if I didn't speak my mind when the item was open for discussion. Sitting here today, I work for the Department of Recreation and Parks, and we're currently being asked to work on layoff exercises in our organization. So in good conscience, I can't sit here and vote to support setting aside money for a conference to Hawaii. Or out of funds that might otherwise be spent supporting health benefits programs for the employees that, again, we're currently thinking about laying off. I would support virtual attendance by any of the JLMBC members, but I just have trouble sitting here and voting for that in the context of what's happening in the city.
Again, just to emphasize, the vote has been taken. If there was a further discussion that this committee would like to have on this item, you can have a motion for reconsideration and a revote. But unless there's that motion or that desire to do so, I think we should just move on to the next item.
Moving on to action item number 4. Committee report 2513.
Good morning, JMC. This report is on the LAWell plan change. This report provides an overview of the change items for the LAWell program that were recommended to the JMC and adopted at the October JMC meeting. So we do have a couple items in this report that has changed since last time. The first item is an update on the medical plan RFP, which will be presented under a separate report shortly. For the second item, we have an update on the dependent eligibility verification audit, or DEV. Since the last update at our last meeting, staff has been working on completing a draft RFP for the DEV administration services. Timeline-wise, we are aiming to release the RFP within the next 2 months and have a vendor selected by September, October, with the actual DEV taking place between January and March of 2026. The DEV can potentially result in significant savings. The prior DEV resulted in about a $5 million savings for the city the last time it was held. Moving on over to our second update is for the cash in lieu incentive. Stella Gerardo will be going over this item for you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm gonna go through the information and background on cash in lieu. So at the October meeting, the JLMBC directed staff to research and report back to them recommendations on potential changes to the cash in lieu incentive program. Currently, the LA benefits program allows employees to opt out of LA medical coverage and enroll into cash in lieu if they can demonstrate they already have coverage and meet one of the following criteria. Have coverage, medical coverage through a spouse or domestic partner's employer, have retiree medical coverage from a former employer, have medical coverage through a second employer, have medical coverage through Medi-Cal or TRICARE, or be enrolled into Medicare. Employees who have health coverage for any of these 5 reasons can choose to opt out of city paid medical coverage and receive a monetary incentive through the cash in lieu program. Regular full-time employees are eligible to receive $50 per pay period, whereas half-time employees in specific MOUs hired after July 24th, 1989 are eligible to receive $25 per pay period. As of January 1st, 2025, there are 1,399 employees enrolled into the cash in lieu program. Now, I should mention that city employees who are also family members are not permitted to be duly covered with LA benefits. Employees cannot be enrolled as both an employee and as a dependent of their spouse or domestic partner. If one employee chooses spouse and domestic partner coverage or family coverage, one employee has to choose that coverage and the other one has to choose cash in lieu. However, employees may have dual coverage under LA benefits with outside non-city employer policies, such as those provided by the Department of Water and Power. After reviewing the details of the cash in lieu program to date, staff determined that more information from employees is needed before deciding whether to make modifications. Particularly, staff lacks understanding from employees who may have the opportunity to elect cash in lieu but prefer not to. So in other words, the number of employees who choose to remain on the city's health plan while having coverage with a spouse or domestic partner or elsewhere is unclear. So in order to determine the number of employees who are eligible to enroll into the cash in lieu because they have coverage outside of the city, either independently or through a spouse or domestic partner, and learn about the reasons behind their decision not to enroll into the city's cash in lieu program, surveys will be needed. We will need to conduct surveys. Staff has drafted a short and simple survey for the purpose of gathering this information. The draft survey is included as attachment B and is planned to be sent electronically to all employees and can be sent as a hard copy if an employee insists. The Employee Benefits Division will need to complete this further employee research and review further aspects of the results in order to identify any possible changes to the current cash in lieu incentive program. Only after this research is completed will Employee Benefits Division be able to make the recommendation on changes if changes should be made. So the proposed timeline for this survey would be as follows. May 2025 to July 2025, the Employee Benefits Division will commence in the following activities. A, finalize and execute citywide survey to gain employee information needs for the cash in lieu incentive program. B, continue to research, review, and discuss options for consideration. And finally, in August of 2025, Employee Benefits Division provides a report of its findings and any potential changes to recommendations to the JLMBC. So we ask that the JLMBC approve the recommendation from the Employee Benefits Division to conduct surveys and outreach with city employees as needed to identify any potential changes to the city's cash and incentive program.
Thank you. I have a question about the survey, a number of demographic questions on that. What is the purpose of that? Why do you need their age?
I'm sorry, the age or the zip code?
All of the demographic information, I don't understand the purpose for that.
Well, those ones are carried over from prior surveys, so those have been our standard kind of demographic questions. For this particular aspect, we kind of thought that it might be able to play a role into why someone's making that decision. Maybe there's going to be the results showing a trend of people in a certain age group that are choosing to take the city's coverage even though they have options outside. It's really, it can be stricken. It's not 100% necessary, but those demographic questions were kind of thought that they might be able to play some sort of role in understanding why we're getting the answers that we're getting from employees.
I think it would have a cooling effect on the uptake of the survey.
We could definitely take it off.
If a significant number of people were to change to cash and lieu, would that at all affect the benefit that we have of the volume to get a discount on the other plans that we have?
So when we go out to bid for medical, typically the underwriting of it says that there's a change somewhere around 10% in the population of a plan. It might potentially change the overall rate for renewal. So 10% of the population of plan can vary depending on the plan itself. So there is a possibility, but then it's unknown what that price might be. The cost difference between an employee level of coverage and cash in lieu is about $500 a month in current pricing of the lowest cost plan. So it would be a question of weight if there was a significant number equal or more than 10% or even higher that would move from a plan specifically because that would it be an offset due to the cost difference. It's unknown at this time, but it's a possibility.
What was the target number we were talking about? Was there one to increase it to?
Oh, no, so go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, no, I don't believe, the information that I came across, I don't believe we had a target number.
What Acella's been working on was kind of a result of the overall large scale plan changes that we talked about when we were looking at the RFP development. And in the thought of cash in lieu is more of why is it not as attractive a benefit? Why are people not picking it? Should we be changing the dollar amount to make it more attractive? All those kind of
We didn't talk about a dollar amount.
No, we didn't. And this is kind of feeding into what Acela is looking at research is feeding into what should that be? Maybe there is a magic number that is going to make someone say yes instead of no.
And format wise, so is it going out as a kind of thing where you have to print it out, fill it out and scan it and send it back, or is it gonna be like a Google form?
The first one, to save effort and money and more effort than anything else, it was planned to be a electronic survey, but then printed by request.
And is the cover email gonna explain how much cash in lieu is, and just in case no one's ever considered it?
We can definitely include that.
Survey will be used to examine a number of aspects of the cash in lieu. One of the things that I'd like to explore with the results is eliminating cash in lieu for spouses who are dependents of city employees. I'm married to a city employee. The city pays for healthcare for both of us, and I get cash in lieu. That seems overwrought. On the demographic side, would it be acceptable to make that an optional section? because I do think that there might be some correlative value in if people decide to answer that question.
What would be the end result of that?
Just as Paul indicated, there may be a trend that you see. But what, would it hurt if it were optional? Or you just think?
How do you mean,
that
how do you mean optional?
Not answer the age question.
As in, you don't have to answer any of the following questions. And we take surveys all the time in, everywhere that says, what's your annual income, prefer not to answer. We don't even have to have prefer not to answer. You can make the required questions red asterisks and the optional questions not.
I don't see the value in gathering age or frankly, or gender on this. I don't see how that affects the cash in lieu or the question that we're asking. Like,
I don't
see that
either.
it makes the-
I don't either until I see the results. If the results come back and there are 100% of the respondents are men, or 100% of the respondents are age 20 to 25, then there would be some value in the results. But I don't know that until I see the results of the study.
I don't know if the conversation, has there been any thought about the current news about Medicaid being cut that might affect the outcome of how people fill this out? Because they might be like, well, I thought I was gonna be on Medicaid, but now Medicaid's been cut, and, like, is there any, will the uncertainty of that have an effect? I know we can't change that, but when the results come back, we might want to consider that people don't really know what the future holds for them.
If I could add, the survey currently does have one open-ended question. We could add more to be able to try to gather more temperature kind of question, feelings like that.
Have you used the age information in the past to make a decision?
I could say in other surveys, depending on the results, it may have played a factor in understanding and even kind of to the conversation that came up of seeing that this particular group was unrepresented, even though I know it exists, right? Like that might have played a factor to a certain degree. It's hard for me to say how much.
Maybe provide the option either to fill it out, not probably helpful. Not forcing people to do it. But at the same time, the more information that you have, the better off you are.
So, I would like to see though, since we're making a bunch of different changes, I think it would be better to bring it back and see, we're making substantive changes to the wording of questions and adding questions, so I think it would be good to see the final before we approve the draft that's still kind of in process. On the ordinance, I have concerns about having disparate subsidy maximums among the groups. That seems,
That is a concern. But, after looking into the matter, we feel that it's probably the best approach at the moment, because that would be the first one. Well, the ordinance would be the first step we would tackle to try to update the language, and then after that, work with each employee group to try to update the language within each MOU. But I think we do need to update the ordinance first. And as for the tiered subsidy, we have had tiered subsidies in the past. I think up until 2018, 2019, I'm sorry, we did have 2-tiered structures for the medical plan. So, but yes, that is, that can likely happen if, if we go down, this route of trying to change the ordinance.
Mhm. And then if that ended up being the only one that was changed, how would that affect?
Well, I think, correct me if I'm wrong here, Paul, but that would be up to the JLMBC to determine when we, okay, assuming that the ordinance approved and that the JLMBC is provided with the ability to set and approve the subsidy each year. JLMBC would have the ability to, if you so choose, match the subsidy to the other MOU groups as well.
And how does that happen as far as like administrative process? Where does that happen in the process during the year?
I believe it's going to be around June when we typically would present the LOL plan options and rates for the upcoming benefit year. So that would likely be the opportunity for the JLMBC to set the subsidy for the upcoming year.
Right. So then we would have to find, well, but it's not necessarily the final. Because there are sometimes negotiations that continue past that date, correct?
I'll just add in that would be negotiation for premium. But the subsidy itself would be something that the committee could set as Chung said, and would be programmed. So in the programming of the system that our third party does, those are two different factors technically, or could be.
But I'm saying presumably the idea is that we would be setting the subsidy based on the premium rates. And so if we're doing that in June, it's the mostly final, it's the final-ish rates. And so there's the potential for, and again, I don't expect this to be a common thing, but I'm thinking of all possibilities. There would be the potential for setting a subsidy maximum, which then based on a certain rate, maybe that changes a bit as far as like which one. I don't know.
Well, currently the subsidies are set in the MOU. So we use that to calculate and program the updated subsidies for the upcoming benefit year. So in June, so the subsidy, since the subsidy is already set, it doesn't take into account what our premiums would be. So I would say that the JLMBC would still be able to set the subsidy in June, but there's always an option to push it out to for a certain time frame. If you decide that you want a little bit more information before you approve what the subsidy would be for the non-represented group and for the upcoming year. I think that we ideally we would have all the rates and plan options ready by June, but in case that there are some pending changes that are have not been decided by June, we do have a little bit of leeway to I think to decide on the subsidy at a later date, but it ultimately can't be too late because we would need to have certain benefits, selections, rates, subsidies in place in order for us to have those programmed into the member portal and reflected on all of our communication materials to be ready for open enrollment in October. But the possibility that the premium rates might not be ready by June, yes, it can happen.
And you're saying there's no issue if that ends up being the only one if ad code is changed and that's all.
At this moment, we would first look to move change the ad code, change the ordinance language in the ad code. And then as the.
No, but I'm saying if that ends up being, if the final result is that's all that's changed. I'm saying if the MOUs are not changed, if this is the only change that ends up being made, because that's, that's an if.
Yes,
is that, you're saying there's no negative effect to having that?
I don't see a negative effect, because it would allow the JLMBC to set the subsidy rate for the upcoming benefit year. So so if the JLMBC so chooses, it can also set the subsidy rate for the non-represented group at the same level as one of the other MOUs.
And then does that, trying to think how to word this. If the carriers are making proposals for renewal based on a certain subsidy expectation, and then we have two disparate subsidies, where does that leave us?
Well, I can jump in. I think that's always gonna be a question for the carriers based on population and experience, right? So depending on where the current population is and where the city's payment is gonna weigh heavily on what their expectation and what their thought of movement is gonna be for the next plan year. So it could be a case in any environment. I think the thought in this particular item, at least the most part, when Chung and I were talking about it, is this is step one moving forward in trying to build trust with the rest of the labor population and seeing that this method could work or is valuable for the city and its employees in looking at this factor. And over time, hopefully it would be not a bifactored situation where there's multiple MOUs that have the old language and then just the small group that has the new language. But it is not, kind of to back what Chung said, it is not that uncommon if we did have that situation and there was a choice by the JLMBC that to have a different subsidy maximum than the regular old language authority maximum. We've had that situation happen before, and we've had the carriers bid and provide plans on a bifurcated system before. So it's not uncommon. It's not something that our TPA can't support or that we can't administer. It's just we didn't see another path.
Are there any other questions or comments? Is there a motion?
And just to piggyback, it's an amended motion since the direction for
To
B.
bring back the survey.
yes.
Just to confirm, so it's a motion to adopt A and C and bring back, not approve the release of the citywide regarding B, but ask that the survey be brought back with the requested information regarding demographic data and so what was the other?
Changes to questions. Or had it noted.
Elimination of the cash and leave for city spouse. Possibility, and then
Well, then that was actually, sorry, the items that were set for this committee to approve, like A, B, C as written. A and C is being asked to be voted on. B is not, and B is, and there's further amending motion to instruct the staff to bring back a revised citywide survey that either makes the demographic data requested information optional or eliminated altogether. Is that correct?
Yes. Move that. Second.
okay, so this is the roll call vote. Shauna Janeway, your vote.
Aye.
Marlene Fonseca, your vote.
Aye.
Lisa Palombi, your vote.
Aye.
Gracie Liu, your vote.
Aye.
Tony Royster, your vote.
Aye.
Matthew Rudnick, your vote.
Aye.
Paul Gerard, your vote.
Aye.
Petty Santos, your vote.
Aye.
We have a quorum. Thank you.
The measure is adopted as
but I don't think.
So then moving on to presentation from Telus Health on the open enrollment.
Okay, my name's Kevin Canoon. I represent Telus Health. I'm Vice President of Client Relationship Leadership. And today we brought the Telus team to present our open enrollment report out. We also have the support of Stephen Murphy from Seagull, who you know. Daryl and Amy will introduce themselves in a minute, but they're going to walk through the presentation today, and we want to thank the board for their time today and letting us present.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Frank. Daryl Brooks, Senior Director, Client Relationship Leader. Happy to be here today. Thank you all for your time.
Hi, Amy Kivior, I'm the Senior Client Service Manager at Telus Health for the city. Go ahead and get started. If you want to pop over to the next slide. Thanks so much. So with this slide, we just really want to highlight all of the activity that we had for this open enrollment period for 2025 plan year. One of the most significant changes was the new life insurance vendor with MetLife. So, you know, I won't kind of go through every single change, right? We're trying to categorize these at high level, but there were increases to the basic life amount for the full-time and half-time populations, increases to the employee and dependent supplemental life insurance amounts. We also had configuration changes to remove the benefit age reductions. I think that was pretty significant and generated a lot of questions from city employees as that was in place for quite some time. So removing the age reduction so folks beyond that particular age would now have an increased amount of coverage along with an increased cost associated with that coverage amount. Those age reductions were also, of course, removed for the accidental death and dismemberment plans as well. So there were also evidence of insurability rules. So those rules that trigger when you increase coverage past a certain dollar amount that requires you to, you know, complete health questions to determine if you're eligible for that level of coverage increase. So there were some rule changes there. I think that did trigger some questions to our call center as well from city employees. There were evidence of insurability rules that impacted city employees ongoing into 2025. So we're seeing some questions roll in for that, but I think open enrollment was significant. Outside of that, there was a change for the tax advantage spending accounts for healthcare and dependent care flexible spending. So there's a new vendor with Ameriflex. We established new carrier files with that vendor. And, you know, that was actually very smooth, pretty straightforward. For both of these significant changes with the new vendors, of course, our team was working with Paul and Chung's team to make sure that, you know, communication was open with these new vendors. And we were planning with plenty of time to make sure that carrier files were on time and had the correct and accurate information to make sure that everybody had a smooth 2025 new plan year. Just a few other quick changes. We did have some medical plan rate updates. There's typically a year-over-year basic disability amount increase, so that happened as well. And then, of course, there's the annual IRS maximum increase for the healthcare tax advantage spending account, which was increased to $3,200. Outside of that, our team did support the typical, you know, year-over-year open enrollment activities. There's new open enrollment guides posted to our employee portal for city employees to access when making their open enrollment elections. Our team did participate in the in-person seminars for city employees. So in case they wanted to get more information, get help in making their open enrollment elections real time. So our team was included in that and attended those 3 meetings, which was great. Outside of that, there was a continued partnership with the city sprint department to support the mailing of those personalized enrollment worksheets. I know that's a cost savings to the city. That was a fairly smooth process. So that's been, I think the past 3 years, we've been working with the city's print vendor to support those mailings. Any questions before we move on? Great, thank you. So the summary slide here is for the medical plan enrollment. It just kind of highlights year-over-year 2024 open enrollment elections for medical plans as it compares to 2025. Not a lot of things to point out here. What I will say is there is an increase in population. that's reflected on future slides. So I think that the next slide is going to tell a little bit more of a story in terms of the numbers here. Outside of that, the pie charts look relatively unchanged. But what we do have, you can absolutely go on to the next slide, because I think these numbers dig in a bit more and they do have those same percentages. But what you'll see here is, an increase in percentage on the Kaiser Permanente HMO plan from 2024 into 2025. The actual numbers that are reflected there, as you see, when you get into some differences such as the Anthem Narrow Network, the numbers themselves aren't very significant, right? So sometimes the percentages tell a bit more of a story, sometimes they don't. One thing to call out though here is the new enrollees in 2024 is the column on the far right-hand side. What this represents is folks that had either a new hire enrollment opportunity in the 2024 year, or newly eligible employees, right? So what this is representing is what were the percentages enrolled into these particular plans, and how does that differ from, either the 2024 open enrollment and 2025. So you'll see they're fairly similar. You'll see that there's a bit more of a higher percentage number there for Kaiser, which does relate a bit to defaulting, but those are, I'd say, relatively static.
Steve Murphy with Siegel. So just a quick observation. The default option is designed to provide some administrative relief for city staff. So if an individual does not make a medical health plan election, they are defaulted to the Kaiser plan, which historically has provided kind of the broadest geographic reach. And just provide some context for that, because nothing happens in isolation. As you look forward to kind of the RFP results, you do have the latitude of designating who is that default plan for any mix of reasons. But to provide an economic value, those 782 enrollees that joined, and they could join in January, they could join in December, so we'll just kind of blend them together. Economic value of being the default plan for Kaiser was roughly between probably $4 and $6 million in that year. So again, there's a tremendous amount of value to Kaiser to being the default plan, and we would anticipate that prospective bidders in the RFP process would also be trying to demonstrate their ability to fulfill that role.
In thinking about the previous item, what does the 159 tell you? Is that high or low for cash in new enrollments historically?
So I mean, I think, if the benefits department wants to take that or comment as well, but what we're seeing here in the 159 is a slight increase when you compare them to open enrollment elections, when folks are hiring, enrolling as a new hire. Perhaps they had coverage with their previous employer, right? These folks are making an original election opportunity throughout the year. So it's a bit higher, but these numbers have been, I would say, quite static past year over year. We can provide more data if you'd like to take a look back as it relates to the other agenda item.
Yes,
We can,
yeah,
we can certainly do that.
Many years since you have, that'll be
Sure.
please fine. That's great. Yeah.
Just open enrollment counts, or
I'm just curious to know if that number is static, or if there have been any changes over the last 5 or 6 years.
absolutely. Yeah, we can summarize, and we can also provide some high level stats either with a separate slide, but we'll get you the data.
Thank you.
Sure.
Question on the Kaiser number for new enrollees in 2024. Do we know how many of those were passive and how many were actually active or opted in?
Absolutely. So the percentage of the 1,766 is the number you're looking at. It was actually, I believe it was 32% of those were defaulted in. So I can actually provide that as well separately, because it's not represented here on the slide, but there was, I think, somewhere to the tune of either low to mid 30s were defaulted in of the Kaiser enrollments, right? So what Stephen is talking about is, we've got some stats here of 782, that's 44% of total new enrollees enrolled in the Kaiser, right? Or defaulted into the Kaiser, but of the Kaiser enrollments, I believe it was somewhere around 30-something%. So I can get that and add that to the deck as well.
Yeah, think if I were to ballpark it again, probably 1,000 of the Kaiser enrollees made an active election.
Active?
Actually chose Kaiser, did that on an enrollment form. About 780 didn't do anything. I think city staff had to take action to ensure they had coverage. So again, it's kind of, it's a passive opportunity for Kaiser to grow membership. And again, I just want you to be cognizant of that economic value.
Any other questions on this slide before we move on? Great. So we've got a few slides here. We've done this in past years. Really, this is for JLMBC members to review this data on their own. You can certainly ask questions at this point. This is just a breakdown of the previous slide, right, broken out by MOU grouping. So one thing I can say is a common theme for American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, Engineers, and Architects. There's 3 sides of this data broken out by MOU. Is that there was an increase for Kaiser enrollments from open enrollment 2024 into open enrollment 2025. So the variation of increase is really the only difference, but there's an increase into Kaiser. The differences are slight, and really when you take a look at some of these numbers, the numbers are small, so they may look like a larger percentage, right? If you look at the top of the slide there for Anthem Narrow Network, we're talking about a difference of 30 people, but it's down by 1.29%. So take those for what they are, but these are really here for your review later, unless anybody has individual questions on these or the next couple of slides. Just in the interest of time, wanted to make sure we're leaving those as an option. Okay, we can actually skip on ahead to slide 9. So this one here is a dental plan enrollment breakdown from 2024 open enrollment into 2025 open enrollment. So the distribution in the plans from year over year is fairly similar, right? There's a population increase here, and really the big difference is, and it's not significant, is the increase into the dental care, DHMO. So there's a bit of an uptick there in enrollment, but nothing significant here. We can move on to the next. Thank you. So this slide is really just breaking out the reimbursement accounts and the usage of those enrollment trends year over year. And what you'll see here is 2024 and 2025, again, fairly static. There was an increase in the last couple of years. You'll see the chart on the right of the slide is the city is represented in the columns in green. So you'll see year over year, the city enrollment into either a healthcare or dependent care reimbursement account is increasing year over year. Not incredibly significant, but you've got almost a whole percentage point from 2024 into 2025. And again, the chart on the right-hand side represents both healthcare and dependent care reimbursement accounts. So what we did also want to highlight for you here is the average contributions, right? How are city employees utilizing these tax advantage spending accounts? So we've got healthcare is an average contribution across employees of $1,900, listing the IRS max $3,200. And with dependent care, what you will typically see is folks maxing that out is, of course, the $5,000 cap. I think is people are trying to get the most that they can from that. So usually you'll see that's quite a higher number of the IRS max of 5,000. But another thing we wanted to point out quickly was the new hire enrollment. So you will see that those percentages of new hires throughout 2024 enrolling into either of these accounts is quite a bit smaller than open enrollment, right? And we tried to take a look at some of the data to kind of paint a picture for you all, looking at employee age, when they were hired throughout the year, because of course somebody may be hired or eligible for benefits in September, and they may just say, I'll just enroll for open enrollment. So not a lot of significant trends there to report for you. So it's a bit lower. Perhaps an opportunity to, include a bit more communications for new hires for these two benefits, but outside of that, not any significant trends to share.
I have a question.
Sure.
I recall, so it's both benefits are use it or lose it.
Correct.
Do we have a sense of like what employees that do enroll lose, like what they don't end up spending?
I actually don't have that data.
Yeah, that would have to come from the flexible spending providers, because we don't see the usage of the claims. We don't have access to that because it's private information. So we'll take it as an action item to decide.
I'd just be curious, even just if it's a way to aggregate it so it's not, get away, get around privacy concern? I'm just curious.
Sure.
what,
Yeah,
You know,
I agree.
are they fully used? The benefits
Yeah.
once folks in-
There's typically a level of forfeitures that happen over the course of the year. That's why there's a lot of emphasis at year end to encourage submitting expenses to make sure you kind of maximize what you set aside.
Right.
But those funds do need to be carried forward and kind of used to the benefit of participants. So it could offset fees in the future, it could do a variety of things.
And yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Sorry, just to add on, we do have a grace period, so, for the 2024 benefit year. If a member still has funds remaining, there is a grace period where I think, if I'm not remembering serves me correctly, I believe it's through, March 15th.
Correct.
That they have to, that they can, incur additional costs under their FSA account. And then they would have through the end of April 30th to submit the claims for that expense. So we, the program does allow employees additional time to incur additional expense and to submit claims for those expenses.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions about this data? We can move on. This slide just represents kind of a big picture, high level view of what did City of LA employees do during the open enrollment period, how many folks were actually making an active enrollment, how were they making that enrollment? So we've got 8,694 total unique enrollments, with 1,685 of those made through our call center and 7,009 made independently through the employee portal. So what that doesn't say is, folks can also certainly still call our call center, get support and any questions that they do have in making their open enrollment elections or benefit questions, and then still independently actively enroll themselves in the employee portal. So keep that in mind. This is, how were folks actually submitting their enrollment elections. So of course, as you typically would see year over year, our highest enrollment day, either on the web, in the employee portal or in our call center, was the last day of open enrollment, as is pretty typical. So that's 14.3% of those enrollments were completed on that last day. And when I say typical, I'm not just saying typical for, the city. That is fairly typical across clients, that folks are either very early to make their enrollment elections or, they wait until the end. So I do want to call out, in taking a look at the enrollment data in support of the schedule of when Paul and Chung's team had actually sent out email communications, encouraging folks to make their open enrollment elections and providing additional information. We did see significant increased activity on those 5 particular days, and they're listed here. So one thing wanted to call out is that there's 23% of all enrollments were done on the days that those emails were sent out. So certainly, I know it's a balance of, too little, too few emails, too many emails. Sometimes you want to, get just in the middle, but it certainly seems that, city employees are reacting to those emails and taking action. Did want to call out, we like to call out the enrollment trend or curve. So you'll see here, we've got 11% in week 1, all the way up to 44% of all enrollments completed in week 5. So calling out that there were 65% of all enrollments within the last 12 days of the enrollment period. So really, that's just the last 2 weeks, so a week and a half of open enrollment. Folks are saying, maybe they wanted to ask questions, maybe they wanted to take their time, think it through, discuss with their family, but they eventually submitted their enrollment in the last week and a half.
If I can make one more observation. Again, this is the 2024 enrollments for this plan year. We had very few changes. We still offered Kaiser, still offered Anthem, so very similar options. Amy noted we have about 8,700 total unique elections during open enrollment. The prior page showed there were probably 4,000 flexible spending account elections, because I have to do that every year. So half of those were just wrote things that people were going to do. If we were to introduce new plan options, align what you have or have completely different options than we had from one year to the next, the burden on TELUS would be that much higher, and on staff from communications perspective. So again, all that's being taken into account as we go through the RFP process.
Sure, thank you. Any questions on this one? Great.
All right, with this slide, we really wanted to just highlight the city's enrollment period and how it aligns with other public sector clients, but also how it aligns with clients of similar size. So you'll see here that the city's enrollment period aligns very well with other public sector clients. And then with respect to employees, or excuse me, organizations of similar population size, you can see that the enrollment period is slightly longer for you all. Typical though for your type of organization.
I think where this will benefit, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, no, go
I
ahead.
was just gonna say is, one of the things, we put this just informational, just benchmarking, but one of the things is you consider plan changes and things like that. Having such a generous window will actually help the enrollment process, because you have that silent period, correction period, that's actually beneficial. Because again, people might be selecting new plans, or they might think they were informed and then have to make a change. So this is good. This is good. It's, again, information, and then how it might help you is important for the future as you take decisions, to know that you already have a generous window.
We think alike, Kevin. That was my next point.
Ah,
Thank you. You're good.
I thought you were done. Sorry.
No, no worries. All right, you can go to the next slide.
Awesome. So for this one, we're really just trying to highlight the online activity. So this is not necessarily folks that are submitting their open enrollment elections online. There is the far right of the chart there does reflect how many online enrollments were submitted that are unique. However, what we have here is, you know, how many employees are actually logging in. That is not unique, right? And then we have the number of unique logins. So what this is showing you is number of unique logins is actually somewhere around the number of total enrollments, right? But there are a lot of folks that are logging in, perusing the site, viewing the pages, the information that's available to them. And what we're also seeing here is a trend and increase of use of the site. So, you know, as, you know, we've been your third-party administrator for several years, right? Year over year, we do see an increase in the page views. The unique page views versus the total page views, number of enrollments and elections. They did go down a bit. So what we have here is we have 81% of the active enrollments were completed online, which is a slight decrease from last year. However, the number was exactly the same in the year prior, right? So you have a little bit of ebb and flow there, but we actually have quite a significant increase in number of page views and folks logging in and accessing the site. So really, one thing I just wanted to make sure I'm calling out, as it's a, you know, it's something we're really proud of, is the site stability and performance. While extremely good last year in the 99 percentile, was 100% this year. So site stability is quite strong. We didn't have any issues where there's blips and folks are not able to complete their enrollment election. So throughout the entire window. Any questions? Great. So here we have this chart represents all calls into our service center in the month of October. So it's not just open enrollment calls, it's also calls for ongoing life events, ongoing questions, help getting into the portal if they forgot their password, et cetera. So what you will see here is big picture is there's a significant spike in calls from last year to this year. So the 2023 open enrollment for 2024 plan year to October 2024 for the 2025 plan year. So quite a spike. What we did see there was, you know, an increase in the average speed to answer overall. While this number in the chart is 2 minutes, 35 seconds is the average for the month of October, I do want to call out that the actual open enrollment calls, so there's a separate queue for open enrollment calls, the average speed to answer there is significantly lower at 46 seconds. So 87.62% of those calls were answered within 1 minute, right? Because we're actually providing all October calls. So we did see that increase in average speed to answer. And really, I think that, you know, in preparing for open enrollment, we try to anticipate, is there significant activity? Are there no changes, right? We work with our workforce management group to try to determine what that activity increase, decrease may look like to forecast those calls so that we can staff accordingly. So while we do see that, you know, the city had 2 brand new vendors for 2025, you know, there wasn't a significant volume of, I would say, changes to the actual plans outside of an increase of, right, options, more life insurance options. So vendors change, but, you know, there weren't medical vendors and things like that. So we did actually add to staff. So there were 16 additional, call center staff added for this open enrollment period, which was an increase from the prior year. We had 11 for the 2024 open enrollment. So we did increase staff. One thing when we take a look at some of this data and see that there's a significant increase in calls, we're going to make sure that, you know, for open enrollment 2026, we're working with Paul and Chung's team to make sure that we're understanding what is their expectation of these volume of changes, the types of changes, right? Are they hearing volume about it already? Do they feel that folks may call in at a higher volume? And we actually already started having regular meetings with our workforce management to make sure that we're, you know, perhaps changing the staffing either by day, by week, or either overall total volume for the next open enrollment period to make sure that we're having a quicker speed to answer there.
It's a pretty significant percentage of abandoned calls. Is there any sense of how many of those people called back?
Actually, there is. So we do have, I mean, I think if you understand the abandoned calls, if folks are dropping, they're going to call back in, right? So that absolutely does kind of cause an issue with everyone's trying to call in at the same time. They try calling back in an hour and those folks are also calling back in. I don't have that number handy, but I can absolutely provide that and include it in the slide, the final slide deck for you. Because I know we do have repeat caller lists. So I can access
That would be
that.
important because, you know, I want to make sure that we're not completely missing some people. You know, people will get frustrated if they can't get through. Maybe they just ask a friend, they ask a coworker.
Right.
You know, maybe they get the correct information. Maybe they just, you know, go off of the information they have and, you know, maybe they make their own decision.
Sure. Yeah, I'll gather that for you.
Building on Sean's question on that topic, so obviously there's like a spike that last week of open enrollment in call volume and probably that last day especially. I'm just curious, like, does your system allow folks to know how long they have to wait potentially when they call, you know, let's say your wait time is 3 minutes or 5 minutes, and I would imagine if the 2.5 minutes is average, there's probably times when it's much longer.
Sure.
During those periods. And does the system allow for somebody asked to be called back rather than sit on the phone for 10 minutes?
Absolutely. And I believe the threshold, and I can confirm this, is 5 minutes, right? So if there was a spike, you know, we'll see spikes on Mondays or the last day of open enrollment, sometimes the first. I believe that spike is, or that time is 5 minutes. They'll have the option to request a call back. So they don't have to wait on the phone, but I can confirm that as well, just to make sure.
That's helpful.
Sure, of course.
Looking at the average speed to answer, your performance guarantee is 90%. And the last 3 years seem to be a challenge. Question is the 90% realistic? Or is, looking at other questions you have, did you achieve that goal or something that you need to modify? Because the last 3 years, especially as I look forward. I'm sorry. I'm talking about the average speed to answer. The goal is 90%. Last 3 years, we have not met that. Question is that realistic? 2, is that, can you reach that goal for other customers that you deal with, or should that be modified? Because I think what 2024 was like 76.15%.
Well, I would say the goal is realistic. There's actually a slide later on in the deck, in the appendix, that has the achievement of open enrollment stats versus the all-in, right? So we do prioritize on open enrollment calls over ongoing calls. So calls for just general life event questions and things like that that don't pertain to open enrollment. And the 90% is measured across quarters, right? So while we may see a dip in October 2023, we're still achieving the metric for the quarter, right? So, but did you want to add?
That's what I was going to say. It's the metric is still being achieved for the quarter. However, I think having this data and being able to look at years past, right? Seeing that we've fallen short, come close, a couple years, but that's kind of why we have the pre-planning going on this year. We're gonna start AE kickoff very soon, actually, this month. And so we're gonna start those preparations and conversations with the service center already. So we do think that the 90% is achievable. And we don't want to lower a goal just to meet it.
No, I'm
So,
saying, no, if, you have to be realistic. You
of
can't
course,
make it
yep.
that out.
Sure,
If it's a situation where it's not attainable, whatever, we determine what we need to obtain it, or
Sure.
if it's 85%, that's what it is.
sure.
And is there anything particular about 2024, 76% that caused it to dip that low?
I think it was the unanticipated increase in headcount. So if you look at the total calls that came in, or excuse me, I said headcount, but calls that came in, the prior year was 4,800. It increased, what is that, 1,600? So we didn't anticipate that increase. And so I think that's what the biggest piece for the decrease was there, for the average week's answer.
Yeah, and I think it's the timing, if I can jump in real quick, I think some of it's the timing of the emails, and we're, like, we're bouncing out, X thousands of emails in one big bundle too, and we've done that before, but I think this year we saw the impact, so our recommendation is no change to service levels, we're committed to try to meet them at this point in time. We don't, if we thought we needed to come back and change it, we would have negotiated that in our recent process we're going through right now. It's not incumbent on TELUS Health come back with recommendations on how we can meet that standard, be very, very close. We're not debating the 89.6, we're debating that this is a 14% below the level. So we will be prepared and present Paul a plan on staffing and where risks exist. And we have a known risk because if you do plan changes, that's gonna just exacerbate it. I mean, we went up with them, so 33% staffing levels this year, and the calls went up the same way. I mean, that was a good guess by us. It could have been worse if we would have kept it the same, because we would have expected calls to go down. But the MetLife and the other, the tax advance spending account changes, we did anticipate some, so lots of insurance, but that number is going to be bigger this year is what it comes down to. So we'll be transparent on that plan with Paul. If there's something we need to come back to this group with as we go into the next enrollment, we're happy to come and have that discussion.
So I see that there's a slide that shows the content, the top 5 inquiries on the chat bot. Do you have a chart, a similar chart for the top 5 inquiries for the call-in?
We can provide that. That's not reflected in the deck, though.
And we'll add that to any future reports we do. We'll just put the call, it's call categories is what we call it. Yeah. We'll add that to future reports. So you always have it available.
And I'm just wondering if that chart would explain why October of 2024 was so difficult in terms of.
We'll get that added. Other questions on this slide?
All right, this slide shows the service center performance based on survey responses from your employees. So you can see here that approximately 24% of your callers took the survey, which is relatively high in relation to other clients across TELUS Health. One thing you'll notice here is that there was a slight decrease in the performance metric. If you look at the second green line from 2023 to 2024, 3.7% decrease. Although we still met the target, right? Like the target was 90%, we achieved 96.3. If you're like me, you want to know why we decreased even that 3%, although it's above target. And so when I looked into it, it came down to 3 main areas. One, customer service issues, technical issues, and then just plan issues, employees upset with their plan. And so one thing about TELUS is that when it comes to customer service issues, we call those employees back. Whenever a survey indicates an employee is dissatisfied because, there was a customer service issue, we call those employees back. We also do call calibrations, as well as coach those employees where there was a service issue reported. So again, overall satisfaction aligns with TELUS Health's overall goal of 90%, and we did achieve that goal. But I think really digging into that 3.7% decrease, that's the devil's in the details. So that's what we really like to focus on. Any questions over this slide?
Awesome. So as you mentioned, there's some stats here in terms of usage of this AVA automated virtual assistant chatbot. Typically what you'll see year over year is a spike in October and November use of this. Steady use throughout the year. Folks are using this tool. The top chart's going to show the unique users by month. So of course the use is, I would say, fairly consistent but low throughout the year. And then of course a significant spike in October and November. So we reflected the top 5 inquiries by type. So these are fairly general. Folks can answer or ask questions, and the chatbot's going to categorize those. We actually are also able to review those with our AVA team monthly, just to make sure folks asking questions that the system can answer, right? We get those to review potential changes we could make in terms of the language in the questions. But a lot of the things that we want to focus on is obviously increasing ongoing use of AVA throughout the year, not just open enrollment, and how else can this tool be used for other purposes that aren't just general benefit questions or ID cards, carrier file contact information. There are some things that we can do here, and we've listed a few, but we'll be working with Paul and Chung's team to do so. But we can actually embed links, SSO links to your vendors within. So if they ask the question, there can be a link that pops up that they click, and they're going to single sign on right into, you know, Kaiser's site or Blue Cross Blue Shield. So we can do that. We can factor in additional workday questions, payroll questions if there's desire to do so. So we can expand that based on the city's appetite to support that. But we can also limit it just to benefit related questions. So we'll look to work together to do that and make some significant changes, or, you know, based on the city's appetite for that. But just some general stats in here in terms of how many total interactions and percentage of use. So 35.7% of the activity for 2024 was during open enrollment. Any general questions?
It seems like there's not that many people using it relative to the population. Is this an issue of people not knowing about it, or is the tool not robust enough? Or is there a sense of how many people try to use it and then don't get their question answered that way, and then try to find their answer a different way?
So we can take that back. I know that when we're looking at monthly reporting, there's really not a lot of activity in terms of somebody asked a question that the system couldn't answer, because they're typically asking benefit questions, or what's the carrier's phone number, or you know, when will I get my ID card, or something like that. So no, there's not a lot of activity where the system can't answer their question. You know, we could definitely take it back in terms of, you know, is it prominently featured? Is it, you know, can it be plugged in links to AVA, can be plugged into more places on the site, right? And then communication about the tool can certainly, you know, how can we change that, increase to make sure that it's, you know, folks are aware that the tool exists. But we can discuss further and bring it back.
Thank you.
And with respects to your question about how robust the tool is, in transparency, it's not as robust as it will be coming 2025. We're creating other pieces and facets to it to where it's able to connect to other data points, like she mentioned, with carriers and your benefits guides, etc., to pull that information in, compile it, pull it in, and then provide a response to the employee's question. So,
Thank you.
sure. All right, last slide here. Future initiatives. So have some exciting things happening, you know, this year. And so one of the big things is Workday Project. We're working to transition eligibility derivation from the current setup to TELUS Health. So that's going to be a pretty big project that we've started already. And then we have early open enrollment kickoff discussions. I mentioned that earlier in the presentation. We're starting to, as you all make decisions, we're starting to take that information and then already starting to plan around the information that we have or that we receive. Then single sign-on between the city and TELUS, easier access to the system for your employees. They don't have to, you know, input a password. They'll click a link and it'll SSO them over into the TELUS Health system, where they're able to access the benefits platform. Mobile application services, everyone has a smartphone, or hopefully everyone has a smartphone. And so we're looking to implement the mobile application service over the next couple months so that employees can access the portal and make transactions from their phone. And we're looking to have that ready by open enrollment to help employees have another data access point this year.
So one real quick idea, you currently have a responsive website, use it on an app or a tablet or anything you wish.
Sure.
But the mobile app is just more configured for that. So again, it'll be optional, people don't have to download it because everybody downloads a lot of stuff on their phones, they find out. But at least it'll be available, it's another modality, and we've talked about it before, where they want to be met. Some people don't mind using the website, even on their phones, some people want an app. So that will be a feature that comes out this year, and it was part of our commitment back to you all last year when we spoke about this.
I have a quick question. So we talked about how, call center, talked about like the virtual chat bot. Isn't there another chat feature where employees, once they sign in, can also chat with a live person?
There is, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Thanks for mentioning.
So
We do have that.
Yeah.
I would say, and I don't have stats available for you, but usage is also fairly low, right? I think a lot of people want to call and speak with a person or just handle it themselves. So we do have, I mean, I think it's probably appropriate to say, can we break out the chats that are just in October with ongoing versus open enrollment?
And I'm not asking for that. I just
Okay.
recall that's another option for.
Certainly.
That I think is good.
Absolutely.
Glad it's there, and maybe some folks might take advantage of it. The call volume's high and they jump off and then.
Right.
Chat.
And some do prefer it, absolutely.
Sure. And then the last bullet point here is just direct billing services. So setting up a billing widget on the member portal for employees to remit ACH payments. And then we'll also have, reporting activity built around that so that we are able to provide that back to Paul and Chung. Any questions? All right.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Item 6, RFP education presentation.
Paul Bordendarm with Keenan. And this is part 4 of 4 parts of health benefits education. Josh should get everybody either a test or a certificate afterwards. Skip the test. So actually, this is my favorite part. Today we're talking, last time, if you recall, we went into the details of underwriting, which I find fascinating, but yeah, something that most people just kind of gloss over. But I think this is more appropriate at a JLMBC level, is looking at funding options that you could be considering relative to how you fund your benefit programs. So without further ado, I'll just kind of go into it. We're going to go into a variety of different funding options. We're going to focus on those that in the RFP we requested the carriers to respond to give you a little bit greater exposure and see if perhaps there's already a fit. If not, hopefully a fit in the future as well too. So next, yeah. So this is kind of the array of funding options. I'll emphasize, if you look at that little arrow, the kind of gray shaded arrow, you have 8 different options here. To the left, it says 100% risk transfer. So this is basically the area where you're not taking on any risk. You're paying premium, you're done. The more you go to the right, the more risk assumption you're taking on. In other words, if projections don't happen and they're higher, you're at risk there. Also, it can be more rewarding as well too. If projection or if actual costs come in lower, you're rewarded by not having to put the money out to carry it. It remains within the city. So currently, all of your programs are in number one, fully insured, non-dividend eligible programs, meaning you're fully insured. It's a non-participating contract, meaning if you do better than what the rates indicate, there's no refund, no dividend coming back to you. It just all stays with the carrier. And that's true for your medical programs as well as your dental and your vision program as well too. In the renewal, we asked for number 2 as well too, fully insured, dividend eligible. So it's like, okay, well, let's limit our risk and have the carriers take on all the risk. But if we have a good year, give us some money back. And if it's a bad year, well, we'll deal with that higher cost as well too. So we looked at that. We looked at minimum premium, which is another fully insured way of doing it, but gives a little bit greater exposure to claim costs. And I'll go into each one individually. And then we said, okay, finally, let's look at the other side, self-funding. If we were looking at dental and vision, it'd be self-funding number 8 without stop loss, but it's medical. Even at your side, we would say we'd have stop loss protection. Stop loss is there to reinsure basically large cost claimants. And nowadays it's not unusual to have multi-million-dollar claimants that for various different procedures. So we want to protect the city from that as well too. So that's kind of the gambit of cost and risk and so forth in the spectrum there. The next slide is kind of what I just went over, the 4 ones that we requested in the RFP. And now to get into the specifics, the advantages and disadvantages of your current model. It's low risk, premium payment equals your maximum liability. It's the most predictable option for the city. You know darn well that, hey, it's head count times the rates. That's your exposure. The insurer retains the fiduciary liability responsibility, meaning you don't have to get involved in claim issues where there's necessarily appeals of, hey, I think this should have been paid this way and that way. That's all pushed off to the carrier. They enforce the plans and so forth. And there's no deficit carry forward. However, your renewals will reflect any type of deficit position that you may be in. And then disadvantages, there's typically, it's less flexible relative to the options available. There's no opportunity for financial gain. They're subject to state insurance regulations as well too. And they require the insurer's programs. For instance, you have to have the administration, you have to have the stop loss or pooling through the insurance carrier. Typically the pharmacy, although we did ask for pharmacy carve-outs, is through the carrier as well too, as well as health management, wellness efforts and so forth. When we look at it on the next slide on a retrospective or participating, where you potentially are dividend eligible. And the way that works is typically it works the same way as the normal plan year. And then after the plan year closes, there's a year-end accounting where the carrier says, okay, here's the administrative costs that we had, here's your claim cost, here's what you paid in premium, here's the deficit. Either you have a deficit or a surplus position. And if it's a surplus position, that can then be returned to the city relative to that. The advantages is typically is that you can retain part of the premium in good years. The disadvantage is that it's very similar to fully insured, so it has kind of those same features on the disadvantaged side. Deficits do carry forward. So if you have a deficit, typically it's not common that at the year end accounting that they're going to say, hey, you need to pay us $1 million or whatever the amount is. They typically just work it into the renewal cycle as well too. Okay, and then the other thing is true up usually happens 6 months after or later after the plan year closes. So minimum premium is one step further on that perspective. In a minimum premium arrangement, it gives the city a cash flow advantage in that the amount you pay, the fixed amount that you pay to the carrier is limited to just the admin costs and the pooling costs of the program on a month-by-month basis, and then you're paying the claim cost as it goes along. But yet there's a total, there's an overall liability limit that's usually a little bit higher than it would be in a fully insured environment, because you're almost quasi self-funding the claim costs there. Again, the first couple of months, you would absolutely love the minimum premium plan because you're just paying the admin and you're not going to be paying much claim costs, because typically there's a lag between when a person goes and seeks services and when you pay services. It's depending if it's auto adjudicated electronically or whether it takes a while to administer, but it can be anywhere from a week, or it can be 6, 8, sometimes even greater than 2 months if it's a more complex case. So during those first couple of months, you're hardly paying any outlay of cash for claims, and you're going, wow, this is the best thing that ever happened. But what you're doing with that money is you should be setting it aside, because now what you're responsible for is what's called an incurred but not reported reserve. It's also known as IBNR, and that basically hits at the tail of the year. And I'll give you an example that's pretty. If we found out as of May 1st that the federal government has said we now have federal health insurance, all health plans, we don't need them anymore. Well, members of your plan will go up to April 30th midnight and still use the plan, right? And those things are going to be presented for payment after May 1st. That's the IBNR. That's the incurred but not reported. And the plan would still be responsible for that, even though we haven't, this new federal program would be in place. So we have to, the city would be responsible for maintaining an IBNR reserve for those claims. So we'd always have some sort of a reserve amount, and it does amount into millions and millions of dollars set aside for that purpose. And the city would be responsible for that. When we go minimum premium, the carriers usually set the maximum liability a little bit higher. We're still subject to state insurance regulations, and there's usually the requirement that we participate in their programs, such as pooling, administration, and so forth. So, but it does give you even greater and more immediate, if your claim cost is good, obviously you've never sent that money to the carrier, whereas in a participating contract, you sent it to the carrier waiting for the money to come back. So that's kind of the main differences there. Any questions so far? There's no test on this, so. Okay. And then finally, there's basically self-funding. ASO means administrative services only contract with stop loss, meaning we would have most likely not only protection on individual claimants to protect you, very similar to even in your currently in your fully insured programs, they have what's called a Kaiser and Anthem both have pool charges in. And I know that Kaiser pool charge is a little bit higher. It's around in the $900,000 range. And I think Anthem's is down a little bit lower, around $400,000 range. What that means is once a claimant in a year hits above that, that experience is no longer counted towards your plan. It goes into a pool and is paid out of the pool, meaning that it's not subject, it doesn't inflate your costs on renewals. In a self-funded environment, it basically means that any claimant above that, you're still responsible to pay that $1 million or $2 million, whatever the size of the claim is, but you are reimbursed by a reinsurer down to what your pooling level is. And sometimes a lot of the reinsurers have features called simultaneous funding, such that you pay the large claim and they immediately reimburse you, because obviously nobody wants to be out a significant amount of money there. Other advantages to that is usually the fixed costs for administration and stop loss. That's what you're paying on a regular basis, so very similar to minimum premium, but they don't necessarily need to be with the carrier whose network you're using. You can use a third-party TPA. The reinsurance can be outsourced to the reinsurance market as well too. So we're not subject to the pooling and the admin necessarily of that particular carrier. It's not subject to any state taxes, and there's some other components that it's typically not set to. The other thing is, as you gain greater experience on your claim experience, you can kind of customize the plan a lot easier to make it a best of class for yourself as well too. Put in the wellness features that you want and want to emphasize, and so forth. Disadvantages, you're taking on the risk. You know, that's the big one there. And is that a risk that you're willing to take on? Considering, I think collectively between Kaiser and Anthem, you're about a $500 million premium on an annual basis. So that is a lot of risk. Typically that we wouldn't expect the Kaiser to go self-funded, but other aspects of their program could potentially. Again, IBNR is the responsibility of the city then, and it is a little bit more complex to administer as well too. Yeah, and you can take on the employer or the fiduciary liability for the claims. We would not recommend it. We would recommend you place that with the TPA or with the carrier that's it's being purchased through. So we will have more information on how the carriers responded relative to our requests for these various areas as we give more detail coming to you in the RFP. Are there any questions?
So you gave us the kind of that one slide showed kind of risk.
Yeah.
Various options, I mean, based on the city's claims history, would we have saved money if we had been in a different funding mechanism? Like, if we just looked at the last few years?
So I, on the medical perspective, you're highly into HMOs, which really, this time we're getting information on an EPO. HMOs, there's not a lot of options. You can go one step over to a participating contract, but that's really almost it. You can't go too much further without creating an exclusive chain, converting it over. So on the medical, it's really hard to determine. On the dental and vision, your experience has been very predictable. And the more predictable your claim costs can be, the more you can look at other options and potentially save money. So if I were going to dip my toe into the pool, I would probably do it first with dental and vision And typically what we do is, and I believe I presented this in the past, is where I've shown you like 3-5 year history and said, hey, this is what your claims were, this is what your admin was, this is what you paid in premium, here's the delta difference. And we expect that probably would show a savings now if we update that presentation as well. Yes. Well, thank you. We'll get you your certificates.
On to 2514, medical RFP report.
Hi, everyone. So now that you're all fully educated on medical, I'm sure this is going to be a much easier conversation to have. But this is our preliminary report that we said we were going to bring back to the JLMBC as part of the RFP process. So just to remind everybody, this RFP did have, which is not common for us in our typical RFPs, to have a best and final option where we allow the providers or the bidders on this particular item to come back and change their price after they submit their initial proposal. Our timeline on page 1 is still our timeline as what we're going through. So after this meeting, we plan to issue the best and final proposal to the solicitors. And then we are going to magically come to an award just a few weeks later and bring that back to this committee on May 1st. That's the plan. Through this RFP and going on to page 2, it was identified in the very beginning and through a couple of different ways. The objective of this RFP was to lower cost. The committee knows, and just to state for this presentation, this plan has received a cost increase year after year for more than 5 years in a row. The current cost for civilian medical is over $400 million a year for just this plan. So it was expressed repeatedly that the objective of this was to stabilize costs. The objective of this entire effort is to stabilize costs and to ultimately try to lower our overall medical costs. And that dollar amount is just the city's cost, not the overall premium amount. We did that through this RFP and trying to ask for every possible option available. So that's on the top of page 3. Those options, we are looking for any possible thing that we could think of. Adding plans, changing plan demographics, everything else. And at the bottom of page 3, those are the plan types that we're looking to award, potentially. The 7 plan types we have identified in the RFP that we could reserve the right to award more than one proposer. We could award no plan at all. But those are the options that we're looking at, and we're going to ultimately award by plan type. Through this preliminary report, it is anonymous to the point that we're not going to be discussing which bidders bid which product. We're not going to give any other details of the overall bidders' proposals themselves. But the intent of this in the stage that we're at is to get the committee updated into where we're at on this very important topic of cost and to what it's looking at leading up towards the BAFO. So on page 4, for perspective, the current rates are identified in the middle-ish of page 4. The upper left-hand box of fully integrated HMO, that's where the majority of our staff are, and majority of our population is. More than 50% are in those plans. Those rates are the rates that the city is paying, and that is the rate to beat, or the rate to either match or beat in overall for the city to recognize the savings in this overall concept. When we're looking at this, and the presentation itself is based off of that same 7 level of plans that we're looking at potentially awarding. We're talking about this very generically and very high level. So a bidder might have proposed multiple different options that we asked for. This is looking at the overall kind of concept of everything that was submitted. It does not take a difference towards the unbundled or bundled pricing options or any other option itself. It's just looking at the higher spectrum of things. At the bottom of page 4, when we look at the current pricing suggested from all bidders, and just I don't think I said it, we received a total of 4 bidders, 4 bids from proposers across a number of the plan options. And when we look at those 4 proposals across the different plan options that are being provided. In any configuration that we kind of looked at this for, it looks like the current pricing shows that no matter what we'd select, there would be a cost increase, a pretty dramatic cost increase to some degree, somewhere between 2% and 40% is what we're seeing as an increase on the current pricing structure, which is not what we asked for. We asked for cost savings. We asked for outside the box pricing structure. We asked for everything possible to reduce and stabilize costs, and that's not what we're seeing at all in this package. In each plan option, which is detailed on page 5, it kind of gives a little bit more detail into what you saw per plan type. So we have multiple bidders on the majority of plans that have provided different pricing options. You will see some green that says current rate lower, but those are all for plan types that are, if you look at the pricing back on page 4, still higher than the target mark. So that's why I'm saying that there's still, overall, from what we're looking at, there is everything's coming much higher than what we wanted, what we expected. So I'm hoping all our proposers are listening to this call and taking some clean sight into what the overall objective of the RFP is, leading before our BAFO process starts. I'm positive for just a second if there's any questions so far on what we presented.
I have just one, and I
Sure.
I'm sure you answered previously, but the BAFO process. So providers can change none of their like responses to questions or their approach, rather, but just the price.
Correct. So you haven't seen it in a while, but when we brought the RFP forward, there's this massive workbook of 1,000 tabs, and there's one tab that has cost on it, and that is the information that they can change. They can't change anything else. So if there is
providers seeing cost proposals from other providers, or
no.
So they
Yeah.
just are changing it based on.
Correct. Nothing is public, nothing is available to be seen, and nothing is going to be detailed further until we go through the BAFO process and we then bring the final recommendation back to this committee on May 1st. Any other questions before I continue? So to further note, and it kind of does relate to the overall concept where this committee is going to be making decisions and our potential proposal when it's brought back either in May or in the adoption of the plan in June on schedule. On page 6 are the planned future updates that this committee is discussing. A couple of these items we actually discussed earlier today, but changes to default, changes towards the subsidy authority and our dev. Those are things that we talked about today, as well as cash and incentive. Other things to talk about, which might play a role later on, just for the committee to remember, our enrollment limit, possible changes, and passive enrollment changes. Those are all things for us to consider as we look through and see the recommendation that comes forward, and then further on decide on how to adopt the plan moving forward. But it's also something to talk about from a competitive nature. I think we had discussed in the RFP and are also asking bidders to consider being as competitive as possible and looking towards how they can really arrange for the pricing structure within our plans at their advantage and also to the city's benefit, right? So that default probably is the most tangible item. The city has already identified that we are looking to change the default and have it to be potentially multiple plans. And so that is, and as the figures from the previous report had identified, that can be a significant population of growth. In all these changes that we're talking about can be significant potential impacts that these proposers might be considering when we get to actually awarding something and creating the plan document. And that's just food for thought as we go through and move forward to this overall concept. So if there aren't any other questions on this particularly, we will be bringing forth, or at least the plan would be to bring forth the RFP recommendation on May 1st. there is a lot to talk about moving forward with this committee, not just with the RFP, but a lot of other items. So we had tentatively scheduled that there might be a need for a special meeting. I think it's pretty clear that we're going to have more than one meeting in May, no matter what, especially with the level of content that needs to be discussed. So I think Chung and I will reach out to the committee of identifying what special dates, or hopefully just one, but what dates might work for a special meeting additional. And I think that might be it. Is there any other questions?
Yeah. Moving on, request for future agenda items.
I do have a request and then I have to run, so my apologies. I'd like some information brought back to the committee regarding SB 729 and how that's gonna play into the benefits provided to the employees and how that's.
Is that the one regarding the infrastructure? Is there any other requests?
Yes, I'd like to hear back on, re-agendize the IAPDP. All right, 10:49, we're good. We'll be back here May 1st. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.